Hello, I hope you are doing well in this strange and difficult time of coronavirus and all these new words like self-isolating and social distancing. This is my first video cast, if that's the correct word, or video message. Yes, I suppose I so love seeing lots of you at things like the Walking Book Club and events and just around in bookshops, which are now all closed. I wanted to try and find a way to talk a bit about what was going on and books and things. I don't know how you found your experiences of things like Zoom and House Party and all of that. It can be quite hard, I think, when there are lots of people, even though Zoom's supposed to have, 100 people on there at once. I find everyone kind of talks at once and it feels almost so strange and so different to how it would be just talking to people that I'd almost rather miss it out altogether. Although I do think it is lovely having those kind of one-on-one chats, and occasionally in the evening, Nat and I sit there with our laptop up and kind of chat to friends. And I suppose one thing that is really nice is that it seems to make no difference how far away you are. You have friends who've moved to places like Amsterdam and New York or the countryside are in our living rooms just as easily as our friends down the road. So maybe there's a positive there. So yes, I suppose that was a long winding introduction to say this is not a Zoom call, this is just me blathering on. Hopefully interestingly. Do please maybe write responses in the comments box. Is that what people do? And I can try and reply to them, or I don't know if there's a way of you recording your own message back, or just send me an email or a text message. That is also always nice. But yes, I think comments box is probably the way to go. So here I am. I'm trying to see what you can see on the screen. You basically see a strange ceiling. That's because I'm in the attic room of our new old home. Some of you might remember that we moved out for 1.5 years while Nat did this crazy kind of project on our home. It basically began because we knew when we bought it that we were going to have to replace the roof at some point. And, you tell that to an architect and suddenly we found we had to also replace the stairs and redo every single room and even the floorboards. So for quite a long time, there was literally just a void, a sort of, front wall, back wall, bottom, and nothing else, like no floors in between. So it's incredibly nice to be back. We moved back just before coronavirus hit. And oh yes, the other thing to say is most of you know, I'm very, very pregnant. Here you can just see, ooh, there's the bump. And we moved back about 6 weeks ago, so the bump was still pretty big. And I always think you have to move back for the builders to sort of finish things. So I think it was only seeing me kind of climbing up ladders as I put books away that suddenly everyone was on site and working till kind of 6 o'clock, which apparently they always knock off at about 3:30. So when we moved in, there still weren't any doors or a bath. I think there was one sink that worked. And then we got to this kind of slightly annoying stage where we couldn't unpack the boxes because there weren't any shelves up to put the books on. So we had to wait for Nat to do the shelves before we could unpack the boxes. So we're living, there must have been about 200 boxes or something insane, which nobody can understand. But I think that's because we have so many books. So many of the boxes were full of books. And it was actually, once the shelves were then built, was incredibly nice getting all those books out. Most of them have been in storage for the year and a half. And seeing them again and finding them new homes on our new shelves. And then obviously we kind of ran out of space and had to put even more shelves up. It's very, very hard to get rid of books, I think, although we did get rid of quite a few, and Nat in particular was very good at getting rid of quite a lot of quite boring looking like architecture practice books. And I also got rid of quite a few old kind of theory books and things like that. Anyway, maybe in the next cast I will show you some of my bookshelves. But the reason I'm up here is because this was actually going to be our au pair room up at the top of the house. Only we didn't manage to find an au pair because I didn't really like any of them, and none of them were very good at playing with the children, and they were all completely freaked out by me having a baby. So it's now just a spare room, which obviously now we're all, whatever we're doing, distancing, and Nat's working from home. It's become the room with the desk in it. Also, the room has become a bit of a reading room for the kids. I will just quickly show you. Ooh. You can see it's one set of shelves that's got all the kids' books on it. And what's really nice is before bedtime, their bedroom's just next door. We come in here and all sort of sprawl on the bed and read stories together, which is absolute heaven. Anyway, I'm up here because Nat is downstairs with the children, and he's been teaching them the story of Jesus through art history, which is really funny. While I'm up here trying to write, I get these little drifts of Vita saying things like, he looks just like Sirius, meaning that Jesus looks like Sirius Black from Harry Potter, who she also thinks Joe Wicks looks quite like Sirius Black. We do our family workout at 9 a.m. every morning to Joe Wicks, who I absolutely love. We all love it, and I really recommend it. I did not think I would be a kind of family workout person. I've never done a workout in my life, but it is really fun. And today he was dressed up as Spider-Man, which Ezra thought was amazing. So here I am up here. The baby is due on the 8th of April, although who knows when it will actually arrive. Vita was 10 days early. Ezra was 2 weeks late. We had hoped to have a home birth, but the UCH has cancelled all its home births, really sadly, because of the pressure on hospitals. Oh, sorry, not on hospitals. Well, on hospitals, but mostly on ambulances and midwife and everyone else. So we're going to go into hospital. The children are going to go to one of Vita's school friends' parents, who really kindly offered to break their isolation for us. I've been getting so many nice messages from people saying, God, this must be such a hard time to be having a baby. I mean, it is, I suppose, but I don't think it's a harder time to have a baby than it is just to be around. You know, it's such a weird time that we're all going through. And I think one of the things that I found really strange is that it's actually very nice being at home with the children and Nat. We all kind of have breakfast and lunch and dinner together, and you know, it's lovely. It's really lovely kind of nesting. I think especially being pregnant, you do really want to nest, and one of the things about coronavirus is you have to nest. But then you go outside for your daily exercise, or you look at the news and it's all just so awful. And I think those two feelings really jar against each other. You know, it's almost like your home becomes a bit of an escape from the awfulness of the outside world, and every time you kind of re-enter the outside world, it throws everything into sharp relief, really. I personally have been finding it very hard to read. I don't know if anyone else has found that. I obsessively look at BBC News and The Guardian and all those kind of updates, just reading more terrible statistics. All the kind of current books that I've been being sent to look at and review and things, I've been finding it very hard to get into, really. And in fact, the only thing that has worked for me at this time has been reading Middlemarch. I had kept this book to read. I've been wanting to reread it for years and years and years, and then I reread this lovely... Then I read this lovely new book called In Love with George Eliot, and I thought, because I was interviewing the author, and I thought, okay, maybe this is the time to finally pick up Middlemarch. When I have a new baby and there's so much sitting around. I think I worked it out with Ezra that I spent something like 5 hours a day feeding near the beginning, because it takes them such a long time. It's like 45 minutes a feed or something, and you have to do that, whatever it is, 6 times a day or something abysmal. But I mean, the good thing about feeding is that at least you have to sit down. You can't really do anything else. Although inevitably you find yourself not sitting down, but sort of holding the baby to one boob while you're crossing the room, trying to like wipe your other child's bottom, or turn off the lunch that you've forgotten is burning in the oven, or picking up a My Little Pony, or I don't know, whatever awful situation you find yourself in. But in theory, at least, you should be sitting down, doing nothing else, and it's a really good time to read. So I thought, okay, Middlemarch, this will be my time to reread Middlemarch. It's so thick, you don't want to be lugging this about with you on the tube. You want to be reading it at home. And I think, one of the things about this time is, we're not really on the tube anymore, we're not commuting, we are at home. So it is a good time to read a thick book. I actually started reading it when I had to go into hospital a couple of weeks ago. This baby, so you can tell it's going to be very willful. It had been all head down and ready to go, and then it just flipped and went breech. And I think it did flip back again a bit, but for some reason there seems to be a lot of space in there, and it's doing all sorts of acrobatics and somersaults and things. And it did go breech again, and obviously I couldn't have a home birth, which had been the plan, with a breech baby. So I decided to go for this thing called an ECV, an external cephalic version, I think is what it stands for. Which, they literally, I'm just going to try and show you. They think, right, okay, the bottom's down here, the head's up here, the body's like this. We're going to literally move it like that. And they do it through your skin. It was so intense. There was 3 doctors and a very nice midwife, thank God, because the doctors just suddenly went for it without really much warning, and the midwife was just like, breathe. It was over very, very quickly, and it did move, and it did then go head down. But oh my God, it was a really intense thing. So I had to go in for that, and of course there was just a lot of waiting around. The whole thing was supposed to take an hour. I was in there for 10 hours, mostly waiting, but then there was this sort of tricky thing afterwards where, although it turned, it then popped its head out again, and then they were saying all these slightly stressful things about wanting to just break my waters and induce me then and there. And I didn't even have my hospital bag. I thought I was going to be back in time to put the kids to bed. So anyway, then the doctors sort of went out of the room to do handover. And while they're out, I just tried the hardest I could to try and get the baby back into position by like wiggling my hips around and jiggling around all sorts of funny positions. And thank God when the doctor came back in, it had worked. And I literally just grabbed my stuff and went before anyone could change their minds. But while I was sitting around in hospital for that 10 hours, because the actual turning only took about, a minute, I started reading Middlemarch, and it was actually really heavenly. I just sat, it's so rare when you have children, especially children who aren't currently at school or childcare, I just have a chance to spend some time alone in a clean room. So I just sat on the bed and started rereading it. And I mean, I've got to say, I don't think my brain is at full capacity at the moment. I'm definitely not getting in all the nuances. This is my the edition I read. I last read it in my gap year before university, and so it's got all these quite embarrassing, like, you see, sort of underlinings and margin notes. Thank God in this one mostly it's just lines. Occasionally there's a word like pathos or something. It just makes you cringe. So I'm definitely kind of sinking into it and not taking it all in every brilliant nuance that George Eliot intended. But I have found it a really, really nice escape in the evenings. So even just read a chapter and go into this completely different different time, different world. I haven't finished it. I'm only, where am I? Page 293. It's actually quite good progress. So, I don't know, about a third of the way through. It's what I've kind of forgotten is that it's actually quite funny. There are like just little sentences that are really good. Like this one I just found yesterday. It's when well, I don't want to give too much away, but I mean, you probably all know Dorothea, young Miss Brooke, marries this sort of oldish, grumpy man who's described as being very buried in his books, Mr. Casaubon. I don't know how to pronounce it. Casaubon. He's terribly dreary. They go off on their honeymoon together to Rome, and she's just come back and seen her sister, who's quite kind of dappy and silly and daft, and her sister Celia has just said that she's got engaged to Sir James Chatham, who had originally wanted to marry Dorothea, and Dorothea thought it was a terrible idea, but is very glad that Celia's married him. And she says Celia's just telling Dorothea about their engagement. She says, yes, we're not going to be married yet because everything is to be got ready, and I don't want to be married so very soon because I think it is nice to be engaged and we should be married all our lives after. Dorothea says, I do believe you could not marry better, Kitty. Sir James is a good, honourable man. He has gone on with the cottagers, Dodo. He will tell you about them when he comes. Shall you be glad to see him? Of course I shall. How can you ask me? Only I was afraid you would be getting so learned, said Celia, regarding Mr. Casaubon's learning as a kind of damp which might in due time saturate a neighbouring body. I found that really, really funny. To think of all those sort of, weirdly kind of dry, musty books and learning as this kind of creeping damp that would infect you if you spend too much time next to it. And then the other thing is, there are all these brilliant moments where George Eliot says these really profound truths. Like, where's it gone? again, it's about Dorothea and Mr. Coulsdon. Of course, there are other characters like the Vinceys and Bulstrode and Lydgate and Ladislaw. But this is when Dorothea is kind of reflecting on, well, what she knows already is a failure in her marriage. She says, they've had their first kind of muted argument. And then the last paragraph of the chapter, I think she quite often ends with a really good paragraph, or begins with a really good paragraph, chapters. She says, we're all of us born in moral stupidity, taking the world as an udder to feed our supreme selves. Dorothea had early begun to emerge from that stupidity, but yet it had been easier to her to imagine how she would devote herself to Mr. Casaubon and become wise and strong in his strength and wisdom, than to conceive with that distinctness which is no longer reflection but feeling, an idea wrought back to the directness of sense like the solidity of objects, that he had an equivalent centre of self, whence the lights and shadows must always fall with a certain difference. And I think this thing of an equivalent centre of self, that, you know, we're all kind of separate and everything to each person falls slightly differently, is really at the heart of what she's writing. And she kind of comes back to that idea again and again. And I think that's why George Eliot is so brilliant, because you don't see everything from Dorothea's point of view all the way through, but you do sort of hop over to a different character and see the world from their perspective really convincingly. And I think it's very hard for writers to carry that off. Anyway, those are my 2 thoughts on Middlemarch so far. What else are we doing? We've been kind of, I think, inspired by the success of rereading Middlemarch. We've been watching loads of period adaptations on telly. So we watched the old Emma with Romola Garai, the wonderful Romola Garai, which is on Netflix. That was really enjoyable. Actually, weirdly, when I went into labour with Vita, so 5.5 years ago, we watched the classic Pride and Prejudice. So I feel like maybe we can't have a baby without some Jane Austen. And then just last night we started watching an old adaptation of Vanity Fair. We're basically working our way through Andrew Davies's sort of list of works. So far, so good. But yeah, let me know, well, what you think of my first very low-tech video message. What you think of, well, what you're doing to survive in this time. And actually, one thing I must say is, if you are, you know, old and in need of help, need of someone to go to the shops, will you get in touch? Because I do know quite a lot of young people who have said they would be really happy to do errands for people. So if you need errands doing, drop me a line. I can set you up. I can put you in touch. I can do something helpful. And yeah, I mean, I think I'm not going to be getting through this very fast. So I will be rereading this for a while, Middlemarch. If you want to read it or reread it, or someone I know is listening to it on audio, I think Andrew Davies has actually done a Middlemarch adaptation, which I might well watch. Anyway, if you want to join in on the Middlemarch situation, please do. Let me know you're doing it. Write in the comments what you think of it. And I think that's all I have to say. I hope you've enjoyed this this video cast. Hopefully next time there'll be a little baby in the picture too. Although who knows. And yes, goodbye for now, and stay well and stay safe. Okay, bye.